Welcome to episode 1447 of the Recovered Podcast. In this episode, we dive into the transformative work of Step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. While our previous work in the program focused on internal transformation and our relationship with a higher power, Step 9 marks the pivotal moment where we move our recovery from something internal to something external. It is here that we begin the courageous process of cleaning up the wreckage of our past and bridging the gap between our newfound internal freedom and the restoration of our relationships. Tonight, we talk about Step 9.
The Recovered Podcast is a self-supporting community. If you are enjoying the show, we would love for you to consider becoming either a sustaining partner or an episode sponsor. Now just tap the sustaining partner link in the show notes to join the community. I'd like to recognize this week's sustaining partners: Larry, Becca, Bryan, Mandi, Jean, Schez, Jim, Shelly, Amanda, and Kim. Now, if you'd like to become an episode sponsor, now just tap the episode sponsor link in the show notes. Your support keeps us online and available to the new person in recovery. So Claudine, Chris, Helen, Carl, this episode is for you. All right, let's start the show. My name is Mark, and I'll be your host. And along with me is Michelle, Clyde, and Matt. How are you people?
Doing great. Awesome. Awesome, Mark.
So listeners, pull up a couch and join us on this journey called life.
As a reminder, we at the Recovered Podcast aren't speaking on behalf of any specific 12-step community. We simply aim to share our personal experiences, strengths, and hopes within our recovery journeys. While we're open to about our stories, we also value and maintain our anonymity.
But people, we're not here to talk about the podcast, but we're here to
do it.
All right, Michelle, tonight the topic is Step 9. But first, during my sabbatical, that 6-month period of time where I took a little time out, my podcast hosting company decided to do away with my premium subscription service and no longer supports my standalone Recovered Podcast app. They gave me a few weeks to shift gears on that. So as a result, we lost about 70% of our revenue stream. So we're really reliant on the episode sponsors and the sustaining partners. So thank you very much for your continued support. We are working on finding alternatives to providing premium subscriptions on another platform. But in the meantime, all the Recovered Podcast episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find all the shows there. Now, back to the show. Michelle, transitioning into Step 9 requires us to move beyond the willingness cultivated in Step 8 and into direct action. This phase of our spiritual journey turns our focus outward, requiring us to take responsibility for the impact of our behavior on the people in our lives. By facing those we have harmed with rigorous honesty and a genuine desire for reconciliation, we continue to build a foundation for long-term healing and spiritual growth. In this episode, we will explore the nuances of this process, discussing how to navigate the complex emotions that arise as we seek to set things right without causing further harm. That's the show notes. That's the lead in, Michelle. But I'm interested in your first thoughts. When you go to a meeting and Step 9 is the topic, where do you usually go?
Man, my first thoughts were, wow, it's been a while since I've done a formal amends process. I think at this point in my recovery, it's a lot of like those prompt amends.
Yep.
So we don't have to go back and apologize, or, we have more awareness of our behavior because we really don't want to have to make those amends anymore after that formal process. We cleaned up our side of the street and we would like to continue to repair those relationships. With that awareness, we're continuing to live by our words, we're continuing to take action. So I think for me, it's more about, always keeping my side of the street clean so I don't have to make any more amends after that formal process.
Yep, you're getting to Step 10. We'll do that next week, Michelle. But we're going to focus on Step 9. But Clyde, how about you? Step 9, what comes to mind for you?
the last 3 weeks of hockey I played where I had to make an amends during the game. Yeah. It's this is about me becoming a part of society again. Being a part of the human race instead of trying to be separate and keep all the wreckage of my behavior to myself. It's yeah. So I need to be able to make amends when I make mistakes to feel I fit in with people. Today.
Awesome. Matt, it's good to see you again. How you been?
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. What about it? Step 9. You saw, maybe you didn't see the notes, but when step 9 is in your wheelhouse, it's a topic at one of your meetings. What do you usually think about when it comes up?
Honestly, the first thing that I think about is that it's the 9th step promises,
Oh, yeah.
So I think that I guess maybe just, I don't know if in general, but like for me, when I look at the whole 12 steps, like it kind of feels like you get through, like getting through your amends is like where the actual, like the major work is done, and then like 10, 11, 12 is sort of like learning how to make that, like all that work that you've done into a daily practice. So I feel like for me anyway, like the reason, like the 9-step promises, like, the reason they're there for, like, or why they occur there, is just if you make it through all that stuff and you get to the point that you're actually like apologizing for the stuff you've done in the past and you mean it and you're doing it for yourself as much as for them, like, like you've gotten a pretty good way along into things, and like that's when things sort of long term started to get better for me anyway.
Oh, Michelle, we talk about the complex emotions. That's part of the notes that I threw out there. And dude, the complex emotion that comes forward for me, Michelle, most is fear. Oh my God. When I first looked at this, I was just overwhelmed with fear. And my first sponsor, Jeff, said, okay, well, you're going to do the hardest amends first. I said, what the fuck does that mean? I don't want to do the hardest first. I really pushed back. And so, but I was willing to make amends, and I was looking for the opportunities. Sure, my wife was there, and my Andrew was there, my oldest son, and Steven, my younger son. Those were there. Those were, vibrating, and there's a whole list, right? I did step 8. And Michelle, back in the day when I first did my first 9 step, I was part of GrowthWorks. You're familiar with that organization, right, Michelle?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So you know what parent group is, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So when you sign your kid up for GrowthWorks, whoops, you're signing yourself up into parent group. And so what the hell? So I'm going into parent group, and that's where you get a chance to, talk about recovery and what's happening in the family life, and basically what's wrong with putting the focus on the parents and trying to recover as codependents, a whole new concept. But after that, I'm in the hallway, and up comes Jeff, and he's in a different parent group. And Jeff is my former landlord. Okay. Jeff is a person I used to steal beer from because he had his refrigerator attached to, I could access his refrigerator through my office. How convenient is that? I thought, well, this is actually a pretty easy one because this dude must be in recovery. He's in GrowthWorks. All right. So I did an amends with him. I said, listen, Jeff, you know what 9-step is all about. And that's what what I need to do is 9-step you right now. And I told him what I had done, that there's this beer and, there was, it was available, and I am willing to, here's $20 to replace some of the beer that I took. And he just kind of laughed and smirked at me and said, I wondered where that shit went. We thought it was you, but we weren't sure. And so that one was a pretty easy one, right? So, but those complex emotions. So the fear was overwhelming, but it didn't need to be there. I just needed to be willing to do the process because the people came before me at the right time. Mm-hmm. Michelle, you opened up that it's been a while since you did a formal one. So I'd like you to think about when you first did your first 9-step, who was the first person that you did? What was that like?
The first people were my parents. And I, surprisingly, like, I felt like I didn't have to revisit those, because when I was in treatment, or I was in the process of going into treatment, I felt like I was already making those amends. But, you know how the beginning is when you're still like in active addiction or alcoholism. Like, these words are falling on deaf ears, because we've said sorry 100 times. We said that we were going to change our behavior, and our behavior just didn't align with our words. So we were never able to build that trust until we put the action behind it. But I felt like I talked it through with my sponsor, and I realized that I need to do like an actual formal, like, sit down. I'm sorry for X, Y, and Z. And I was received pretty well. I don't think I had any amends in the beginning. They were like parents and close friends where I wasn't received, I don't know, warmly, I guess you could say, and forgiven or whatnot. But the humility in that, like going back to my parents and like just even having a conversation about what it used to look like, was difficult for me. I mean, we're talking about complex emotions. There was a lot of shame behind that and guilt. So yeah, it was still difficult, even though we were in a good place at the time.
Michelle, I'm a little curious. Did you have both your parents in the room at the same time?
I did not. I did not.
Okay.
Honestly, I think so. My mom, that went well. My dad, it was more uncomfortable for him. I did it separate at a different day and time, and it was more uncomfortable for him than it was for me. I think that they probably maybe would have felt more comfortable being together for that, but yeah, my parents aren't married, or I had to do it on separate occasions.
Got it. Clyde, you talked about that hockey game. There's always opportunities to practice this program, but you talked about that this process helped you become part of society again. Why don't you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
It's fourth through the 8th step made me aware of how my behavior impacted other people, and I really, before that, just didn't care so much about other people. It was all about me, getting drunk and satisfying my pleasures and my urges, and it was truly enlightening how it made me aware and start to honestly look that the people that I blamed for all my problems, how much of an ass I'd been to them. And not initially, it was just the hard work of just doing it, going through the motions. But as you go through the process, in my case, I've developed empathy and care about other people, which I didn't have. I didn't have before Alcoholics Anonymous. I only cared if it was going to negatively come back on me.
All right, Matt, I was trying to find the promises really quick and not able to do that. But what's really interesting, Matt, is you bring up the promises, and that didn't show up in the show notes at all. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But what was the first one that you realized? What was the first 9-step first 9-step promise that was realized by you?
Well, I mean, I suppose that I think that the main thing that I don't know if it was the first thing, but the main thing I noticed was problems that used to baffle me weren't quite so baffling. And like, it wasn't exactly, well, number one, the things that were baffling me, like, why can't I stop drinking? Like, why, those problems were like just not there anymore. But I always, I would seem to have like the same kind of problems, whether it involved like some person that I was either into that wasn't into me, or somebody who was into me that I wasn't into them, or being lonely, or whatever the hell it is, or work, prestige, something. Invariably, it would just like boil over and become ugly and be the worst. And it just seemed to be, I would have that initial flush of like, oh yeah, like I still have those problems, but they did seem to like pretty much like in their own time get better, which never happened before. So, it was, like it wasn't like a shock. It was more so one at some point I just sort of realized like, oh yeah, like these things actually are like getting better. Like, and I didn't really know how to handle that. Like I was, like I found myself suddenly not baffled by the same things that seemed to be always bothering me. Like that didn't mean they didn't bother me anymore.
Yeah.
Because they still did.
Yeah.
But they weren't like these baffling, unsolvable problems because I had done the work up to that point that showed me like this is what, this is where the problem stems from. This is what you have to do about it. And then like making my peace with like actually then doing that stuff and feeling like that wasn't a raw deal, it had to be figured out along the way.
All right, Matt, here we go. This is the promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises?
You think not?
And Russ, my sponsor, would say, we think so. They are extravagant promises. Yeah. Anyway, there they are. Michelle, coming to you. Let's go to the questions. And the first one's really this subtle differentiation between an apology and amends. But the question reads, how does the active process of cleaning up the wreckage demonstrate a deeper level of responsibility than a verbal apology alone? What do you think about that?
As I said previously, words don't mean anything without action. So, like, we've said sorry 100 times in active alcoholism, and they start to fall on deaf ears after a while because our behavior wasn't changing or aligning with our words. We were never able to build that trust in our relationships because we were powerless over our actions, which were harmful to our loved ones. So when we got sober and we started doing the work to clean up our lives, we became capable of showing that we care about others by doing the next right thing and proving that we can put that action behind our words. And that takes time, I mean, I said, they've heard the words before, but the behavior has to change. And through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and repairing the wreckage of our past and repairing these relationships, our behavior continues to change. And our loved ones start to see that.
Yep, that's awesome. So the behaviors change. And, I talked about those difficult amends and the easy ones. Yeah. And I picked Jeff, that easy one, because it's easy to pay money back, right? Especially when it's a small amount. It didn't really have to demonstrate change behavior. It is those loved ones. There's the living amends, right? The ones that really get to see us up close and personal. How well is this recovery process working for them? For them. Clyde, let's talk about setting things right. We're going to keep on the same sort of mode here. How does focusing on setting things right change your approach to those you have harmed compared to an apology?
So it's about me wanting to change. I had a picture of the man I wanted to be, and that wasn't who I was. And to get to that person, I got to do the work. Mm-hmm. And the work is not, I would challenge you. You said the money's easy to pay. That was one of my big ones. It's not so easy when your habit is of borrowing money and not paying it back and leeching off people. And if you want, money was always a problem for me. Always, because I didn't respect it. I didn't respect the work it took to get it, and I didn't respect where it came from. And the only way that changed was I could have declared bankruptcy. I took the easy way and say, well, I'm just going to start fresh. I'm sober now, and that was past behavior, and I'm going to be different. I wouldn't have been different. I'm convinced if I had done that, I wouldn't have learned the discipline and the honesty of meeting my commitments. The person I wanted to be was a man of my word, and a person who borrows money and borrows shit and then doesn't pay it back, whether it's rent, stereos, cars, all the shit, you know, that for that behavior to change, I need to stop. I need to clear away what I've done and make that honest effort. And when I did that, it took me 2.5 years. And at the end of 2.5 years, I remember I went into the credit counseling office and the woman gave me a stack of letters certifying that all the people that I had owed money to, I was clear and free. And my life changed in regards to money. It was still difficult, and I had to teach myself discipline, but I now knew I could do it. I now had the confidence that I could do that, and I was able to retire after a long career. Money became something that I could handle. That's directly, I believe this, it was directly a result of that 9th step amend. And it's like that in other areas. Relationships, my first wife, the way I made amends had an impact on how I treat my second wife and the man I learned to be. And it's the training ground, right? It's the training ground of being a different person. It's easy to sit in a room and talk about, that's what we used to do. You sit in a bar and talk about how great we are. We could do that on paper and do all the paperwork, but to actually go out and do it, you know, it proved to myself that I belong here. I can be the man that I think I want to be.
Yeah. Now we sit around tables and talk about how shitty we were.
Yeah.
But, you know, you talk about borrowing money with, you know, there's a word for that, borrowing money without paying it back. What's that called? Called stealing.
Yeah. It's all a form. Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I talk about my first amends with Jeff. You know, I paid him $20, but you know what? I drank more than $20. I gave him $20 because that's what I had.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's kind of a half.
I didn't have it. I didn't have the money. Credit counseling told me how much I was going to keep, and the rest of it went to pay debts until it was all paid off. And I hated it. I hated every time I made a payment till the end. Till the end.
Right, Matt, we're going to move into rigorous honesty because we talked about that in the notes and some of that's necessary for doing step 9. Talking about rigorous honesty and how that sets the table for your future recovery, how they can get you on the right foot. So, Matt, in what ways does rigorous honesty required for making amends ensure that your future actions define your recovery? Talk about that process.
Well, honestly, I think like what Clyde just said is pretty much hit it on the head. You know, like it's hard to become so honest with yourself to be like saying like, I don't respect money. I don't respect what it takes to go into it. I don't like, you know, like that is a level of honesty that is like, you know, it doesn't just like land in your lap one day. Like you do the work of the steps to get to a point where, you know, you can believe that stuff. You can see it in yourself, and like it like everything else, it's like piecemeal. It's not like all of a sudden I like one day realized now I'm honest because I stopped drinking. It's like you are forced to be honest by doing the steps that lead up to step 9 over and over. Like you know, you become, I think like in the 4, you know, in 1, 2, and 3, you're forced to like look at your, like, this is your life. It's all fucked up. Let's be honest. You're an alcoholic. And then getting into like, well, okay, I'm an alcoholic. What does that mean? Let's get honest about that. And then you have to start looking at your defects of character. And then how do I not live this way anymore? And it just starts snowballing until one day you've been like going through the process of doing that, and then like it's at some point, for me anyway, it was just like, as much as I still feel like that piece of shit liar who, you know, will tell you whatever you need to hear to get exactly what I want, like maybe I guess I'm just not that anymore, even though I still sort of feel that way.
All right, Michelle, we're going to move over into those complex emotions. You know, I talked about my fear and how that really kind of petrified my program. You know, it kind of hit the pause button real quick there. So here we go. What are some of the complex emotions maybe that you experienced that arise when you seek to set things right, and how do you prevent these feelings from stalling your progress?
So I feel like some of the complex emotions, you mentioned fear, that's a huge one. But there's others that I think we all deal with when we're facing that formal amends process, and it's shame, resentment, hurt, any type of fear-based emotion. And when I was in the work of step 8 and 9, I had to repeatedly tell myself that this is an action step that'll set me free, just like 4 and 5 did. You know, I had like that spiritual experience with the introspective steps of 4 and 5, and I knew what was on the other side of this difficult process. So I had to trust in the process up until that point, and I took my higher power and my sponsor along with me for that ride, and I knew I would have all the aid I needed to carry this step out. But there was a lot of positive self-talk to get me through all of these. I also had to remind myself of some very important feedback that was given to me through the fellowship, which was that the step is not only about the amends, but it was about clearing my side of the street, and being able to like walk out of my house and be able to face anyone, you know, and when I'm walking down the road. And other people's, the other suggestion was, or the feedback that I got was that other people's response or reaction to my amends was like none of my business. You know, this is about, my business was the action itself and clearing my side of the street like a street sweeper. I remember a lot of old timers, me and my cousin thought it was hilarious. We're both in recovery together. That we're, you know, it was the comparison was a street sweeper, but if you see them in the street, like they're sticking to their side of the street. They're not driving all over the road, you know, and it's a pretty good comparison when you think about it. But yeah, and that helped me like kind of lighten the mood about the whole situation too. Like just being a street sweeper, I can do this.
Yeah, I like that, you know, comparing step 9 to your, you know, 4th and 5th step, and you got through it, right? You made it through it, and you became a better person because of it. Same thing with going through 8 and 9. Same process, and that fear can be there, but it doesn't have to petrify you. It doesn't have to stall your progress. You do have to walk through it, though. You do have to do it. Clyde, let's talk about some of these, that guilt and shame of our past behaviors, and how that plays in this 9th step. So how does the transition from internal reflection to direct action help you process the lingering anxiety tied to your past behaviors?
Again, it's all about changing who I am and changing my behavior. It's if I live in the past and continue with doing the things that and thinking the same way, I'm going to continue to carry that stuff. And I had to prove to myself that I could be different. And the ninth step is the tool that allowed me to do that. I could actually, because all those emotions, every amend had a little bit different type of emotion, right? The ninth step is everything. There's not just, because it deals with people, and people is where all these emotions come from, our dealings with people. And each one, I still had the goal in mind. I had the person that I was trying to be. I had a vision for what I wanted to be. And this was like the homework. This was the way. And what happened is I changed. I understood those past behaviors a lot better. And they weren't me anymore. They were things I did, and they were about bad behaviors and bad things I had done, but they weren't about me as an individual, because I was changing. I was becoming the person I wanted to be. Right in the beginning, the ninth step, I was so excited because I could see that, it was finally a way out. I'd never seen a real way to be part of. I was always sitting on the outside.
Matt, let's talk about this process. What that feels like, facing that person that you've harmed, and some of the anxiety, that fear that you might have experienced. Can you relate to that, Matt? The first time you had to face someone you knew you'd harmed and do this?
Well, I did the opposite, where I started with the easiest, where it was my mom, where I knew no matter what I said, she would accept what I was saying and just wanted me to be happy and everything else. And so, I didn't have a lot of what if she won't accept my apology? It was more so everything else in the steps the first time through for me was well, what if I do this and it doesn't work? What if I don't feel any different? And that's just the way it's gonna, the way it is now. And it happened later where I was had a little bit more trepidation for, doing it. But I think that for whatever it's worth, I looked at it as I've done the steps up to this point. I see myself differently. I want to continue to believe that I am different, that the steps are working in my life. And that does not alleviate me from all the bad shit that I did. So I gotta apologize to these people, or else me suddenly turning over a new leaf and becoming a better person is just some bullshit I'm telling myself. So whether they accept it or not, I want them to accept it. I'm not like a robot who's not worried about what they're going to think, but truly, whether they accept it or not doesn't matter. It's just, I've done my part now to say I imagine somebody who I've fucked over 7 million times with all of my terrible behavior and drinking. I've turned over a new leaf. I'm a nice guy now, and then it's yeah, well, what about all that money you owe me? Nice guy, and it's just so I had to do that. And if they forgave me or not was just sort of part of it, but it wasn't the crux of the matter. So I when I've gone over the amends process with sponsees over the years now, I sort of have tried to at least hammer into their heads where it was from my position, which was it may not go right, it may not go the way you want it to go, where they just forgive you and say how great it is that you got sober and they're just happy for you and want you to keep doing what you're doing. And if that's not the case, it doesn't matter. You made the effort. You did the part where you are turning over a new leaf because you did something hard that you would have never done if you weren't in the process of getting sober and trying to live a life based on aligning your will with the higher powers. If you just, and the other thing is I was very much I was saying I was sorry all the time. I was not a person who was hesitant to apologize. If anything, the one amends that I had that was a little bit uncomfortable was with my sister, and she just told me you always apologize for the dumb shit you do, but then we're the assholes if we don't accept the apology.
That's
so
right.
so sure, I whatever you need me to hear, I'm hearing it, but I'm tired of you apologizing for shit. You're just, you're crying and you're upset and you mean it, but at the end of the day, you just keep doing it. So that was tough, but she was right. That's just the way it was. So in the 12 years that have passed, I've not had to make another amends with her.
Yeah.
So
that's a big deal. That's a big
one
deal.
way or another, it all works out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. My easiest amends, I think, were with my parents, because they just had this profound desire for me to just be better. We're just happy that you're doing what you got to do and that you're on this path, and we're just happy. My mother was very uncomfortable. She really didn't want to hear the details. She really did not want to know about this shit that happened 20, 25 years ago. So as she was becoming uncomfortable with specifics, I more generalized that, Mom, my drinking and using really was a form of me avoiding you. It was a way of me not being present to you.
Yeah.
It was a way of me really screwing up some holidays. And so the commitment I want to make to you is that that's not going to happen again. Right. As a matter of fact, I want to be more present to you. And by the way, what I want to do is every week on Monday nights, I'm going to come down to Henry Ford Village and I'm going to spend some time with you, and specifically Dad, because my dad and I needed to repair this relationship, which is going to take some time. My mom and I, not so much, my dad. But anyway, that was one way of me dealing with someone that didn't want specifics. I was just checked out, so that's not going to happen anymore. Difficult one was my wife, and we've talked about this before, but because she wanted to see real change, and she deserved that, and that took time. and it's still taking time. 23 years later, I still have opportunities to show I'm a different person because I am human. But Michelle, I want to move over here and talking about, that fear of being found out. And sometimes telling these secrets can really that could be a problem, right? I have a fear of being found out. But here goes the question. In what ways does practicing rigorous honesty when facing those you have harmed act as a safeguard against the fear of past secrets being discovered?
Practicing rigorous honesty protects me from the fear of my past secrets being discovered because there's nothing left to hide. And like you were saying, like your mom did not want to hear. It was very uncomfortable for my parents. They did not want to hear all of the details of my past. But there were some things that I had to, especially with my parents and my kids, like there are details I needed to give them because then it would hold me accountable. Like if you see X, Y, and Z happening, like that I'm possibly back in active addiction again. So there were things that I had to come clean about and talk to them about so they knew more about my use, my alcoholism and active addiction. So when I'm honest about my actions and take responsibility for the harm I caused, I no longer live in constant anxiety about being exposed, right? So in recovery, secrecy feeds fear, but honesty brings relief. So by choosing honesty, I free myself from the burden of maintaining lies or half-truths. I mean, that was like a full-time job, or that double life, right? So facing those, the reality of that, and facing those that I have harmed with openness allows me to stand in integrity, even if the outcome isn't what we hope for, right? But instead of fear controlling my behavior, honesty becomes that safeguard that keeps me accountable, keeps me grounded, and it keeps me focused on healing rather than avoiding. So,
all right, Clyde, I'd like to get specific because it's helpful for the new person that's not gone through this process. So, and part of making amends is taking responsibility, right? An apology is just words, and amends is take some action. Can you think of some specifics that you did in step 9 as far as taking responsibility?
Yeah. So one amend I'll talk about was I was separated from my first wife when I got to AA, and I was separated because I was an adulterer, and my best man at our wedding, and he was my best buddy and my running buddy and my drinking buddy. He told her I was lying, right? I was covering up for myself and always making up excuses. And my best buddy fell in love with my wife and told her the truth, so she left me. And that was a couple of years before I got sober. And then I got sober, and I really wanted to repair that relationship. I wanted to get her back terribly, and but she didn't want it. So my amends, I had two parts of that amend. One is I went and talked to her, and I told her the truth. And in my case, the process I went through for that particular person was she deserved to know the truth, that she wouldn't be questioning, because later what happened is Steve, this buddy of mine, they broke up as well. And would she be questioning, was he lying? Just it had to be out in the open. And the risk was she would hate me even more and then I'd blow all the chance of ever getting her back, right? But I knew in my heart it was the right thing to do, is to face her and be honest about it. And I did. And then the second part of the amend was accepting that she didn't want to come back. She didn't want the relationship to continue. And I'd been stalking her up till early recovery, right, with notes and calls and shit like that. And the second half of the amend was leaving her alone. And I've had zero contact with her since for 45 years. And that's part of the amend, to let her free and let her not have to deal with me anymore. And then Steve, realizing through the amend or through the inventory process, is I blamed him. I actually wanted to hurt him badly. And I realized through my inventory that I was a shitty friend. I dragged him through a lot of bullshit. and used him to cover for me, which was really unfair, and other things. And I owed him an amend as well. And my amend to him was, hey, I was a shitty friend. It was not, because he later felt bad, right? Because it destroyed our relationship. So 2 relationships were destroyed in my behavior. And, I wanted to tell him face to face that wasn't about him. That was about me. And, and I haven't seen him since either. So, right. But it was the right thing to do. And it's allowed me to be a different person today, with the people that I have relationships with.
Awesome. So, Matt, in step 9, there is that exception clause. So may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. How did you work through that? How did you, how do you parse that out, that maybe this amend could create further harm? Did you ever have to really ponder that?
Well, I look at it now almost as like the girlfriend clause, like where it's just like you're going to want to use this as a reason to contact your ex, and you shouldn't. But I think that, number one, I did exactly that. So, lesson learned. But like the part where, you have to get honest and figure out like, am I being selfish with this? Like, with this, it's hard to, and it's one of the good reasons to have a sponsor when you're doing it is you're going through this sort of transformative process, and it's hard to say what's what because everything is different, and is it really such a bad idea if this person who meant so much, Clyde, the story that Clyde just told sounds like, a pretty intense thing, and then he's like, and that was 45 years ago. And it's like, that's just kind of the way that AA works in my experience, is like everybody has a story like that is just like, here's the cast of characters. There's so much drama. There's all kinds of crazy things. And it's like being able to parse out like, well, would it be wrong of me to get a hold of this person and let them know this is where I'm at? You kind of just have to work the previous steps to know whether or not your mind is in the right place, and hope that everything is going to work out the way you want it to. And if in doubt, don't get a hold of your ex. It's kind of been the way that it's worked for me. But there's a lot of stuff in the big book about it, and you'll hear a ton of stuff at meetings about whether or not people were able to successfully make amends to people that they have a deep resentment against, or certainly did them wrong. A lot of times it's we're the bad guy. We did the fucked up stuff that we have to apologize for. But that doesn't mean that the people we associated with were these perfectly wonderful, innocent souls that had no, part in it. Often it's they had a lot too. So it's there's a lot of gray area that needs to be navigated.
Matt, do you remember me talking to you about the 9th step that I didn't do, the person that I did not do?
I don't. No,
okay, so
that
was Dan, my former employer, and I stood on this exception clause that I can't show these secrets to him because I'm going to be harmed, right? And so he stayed in that never column, and Russ was working with me, saying, well, are you willing to be willing? And I, sure, but no, he stayed in that never column. He got sick and died, and I talked about that last week, but it was profound for me because that period of time after he had passed away and I did not make that amends, who was harmed by me not doing that amends was me. It was me, because I was fucked up in the head about this, that I missed this opportunity. And how do I deal with this? And I never really settled into this very well. I wrote the letter and I visited his grave site and all that. And I never really got that relief until one day, and I talked about this last week, but I was at Kellogg Park in Plymouth, downtown Plymouth, on a Friday night. And there was a concert. You know how that goes. Yeah. And so I'm standing there, and this young man walks up to me and says, "Hey, Mark Stapleton." And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, do I know you?" And he said, "Yeah, my name is Mark Hansen. Dan's my dad." I said, "Oh, fuck." And so there's that period of time. What am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? And so I said, "Well, Mark, I just want to let you know about how important your dad was in my life." And I said that, yes, there were some difficulties between him and I, but I want you to know that I'm the engineer I am today because of your dad. I learned a lot about how to do, how to act professionally in a business, and I pursued my career using the tools that your father had taught me. And so I just want you to know that I really appreciate you sharing your father with me. And I got the relief, Matt. I got the relief. Yeah. So, Michelle, the Recovered podcast is really about the new person. And so I'd like you to imagine that new person in front of you and has done that step 8 and is faced with those complex emotions. What would you say to that person?
So step 9 can sound very scary at first. I think we do a good job without realizing it of intimidating each other in the rooms at times about these action steps. We don't mean to, but I think we end up making it, geez, that doesn't sound like an alcoholic at all. We make it a lot bigger than it needs to be, right? But it isn't about punishing yourself or reopening wounds just to feel bad. It's about freedom. So making amends is how we stop carrying the weight of our past and we start living differently. You're not being asked to do this alone or all at once either. We have the guidance of our higher powers, our sponsors, our peers, our fellows, and it's done with, and of course my dog's going to start barking. Sure. It's done with, I want someone to grab him. Dugan is now on the podcast, everybody. Guidance, patience, and care. And I would tell the newcomer that step 9 is about taking responsibility without causing more harm. And I would keep talking, but I need to put the dog out, so that's okay.
Coming up next.
This week in recovery, where we talk about what's going on at the home group and what's going on in the family room.
Don't touch that dial.
All right, Clyde, it is This Week in Recovery. But listeners, we're glad you're here for another edition of This Week in Recovery. Now, whether you're celebrating a win or navigating a challenge, we're in this together. Recovery is not so much about recovery is about so much more than what we leave behind. It's about the meaningful and beautiful life we build in its place. A little bit of new intro there that I stumbled all the way through that, Clyde. But what about it? This Week in Recovery, what's been going on in your world?
I'm happy to be here, Mark. Happy to have all of you people in my life and be a part of. And got lots of things going on, but nothing. It's all good. It's all good. I'm glad to be through the holiday season. I'll say that. I like my routine, and holidays get as much as I worked on it, I still got that part of my brain that gets a little goofy and uncomfortable, if maybe is a better word for it. But so I'm glad to be on this side of it.
Yeah, I am too. I took a bunch of time off. I took 2 weeks off, and that's the most time I ever took around the holidays. And I'll tell you, that Sunday night before going back to work, oh my God, I knew I was going to face that inbox. Oh, I finally got through it today.
I don't miss that. Now that I'm retired, I did have that recollection. I did the Sunday.
Matt, what's going on, Matt? How you been? What's been going on in your world?
Oh, I'm good. I don't know. It's been. I too echo the sentiments of I'm happy the holidays are over, but I don't really have anything particularly noteworthy that is going on. I do the the usual sort of seasonal depression thing, like where it's like at least when it's winter, like in the holidays are going on, there's at least something going, you know, like, but now, like in Michigan anyway, it's like, all right, I hope you're ready for 3 more months of this, because it's here it comes, you know. And it's,
oh dude, we're all
can be a little bit much.
All 4 of us are in Michigan, and what a day it was today.
Yeah.
Woo, what a gloomer.
Rainy and gross. It looked like it was like it looked like the sun was gonna set at 9 a.m. like all day. Like it was just terrible.
It got worse from that. All right. So how about you, Michelle? Breathe some life into this room.
I'm with Matt. The seasonal depression and the irritability, and obviously everyone heard me yelling at my dog on a live podcast. Yeah, a little bit short fused, but I'm celebrating 11 years today.
All right.
All right.
Positive note. Yeah, so today's my anniversary.
Woo! That's awesome.
Some good with
How many years was that?
11.
Oh,
11.
Master number 11. Yeah.
XI.
Year 10 was rough. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, but it kind of, it was a year that had me level up. Kind of like year 5. It's a level up year. Yeah, just a lot of, you know, staying sober becomes easier, but life does not get easier. And it was definitely one of those life on life's terms years. So just happy to be clean and sober another year.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Year 10, my 10th year was the year that Andrew passed away.
Oh, man.
And so that was a year of growth.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but boy, oh boy, what a change in my recovery process that brought me.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, you've heard what we think about Step 9, and we want to hear what you think. But first, let me invite you to become a content contributor to the Recovered Podcast. All right, listeners, become a part of our show prep community. By joining the Recovered Podcast group, you'll shape our content through surveys and even get the chance to call in and share your experiences. Simply email me, mark@recoveredcast.com, or click the email link in the show notes to get your invitation. All right, going to go to you, Clyde. We did ask our listeners this survey. Clyde, we asked, who was the first person you made amends to?
Parent.
And number 1 parent was number 2 at 22%.
Spouse?
I'll give it another shot. Spouse was number 1.
Yeah.
That's right. So I understand that. All right, Matt, we do have phone calls, and our phone call segment is brought to you by our Recovered Podcast Sustaining Partners. All right, our sustaining partners are a big part in our self-supporting movement this week. Larry, Becca, Bryan, Mandi, Jean, Schez, Jim, Shelly, Amanda, Kim. Well, they made their sustaining partner monthly donations. So thank you very much. Like I said, we lost 70% of our revenue stream. So your donations are really appreciated. So thank you very much, Larry, Becca, Bryan, Mandi, Jean, Schez, Jim, Shelly, Amanda, and Kim. Now, listeners, if you have experience with Step 9, well, we would like you to call in and share right now.
If you'd like to join the conversation and add to the content of the program, call us right now. Or use the voicemail button found on our website at recoveredcast.com. If you use our podcast app, just tap contact and then tap call the show and leave a message. Call 734-288-7510. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, Matt, coming to you. Ron from Mississippi coming your way. Here we go. Looks like I need to refresh Ron, so let's do that again. So Ron, coming your way. Here we go.
Right on.
Hey, good morning, Recovercast crew. This is Ron P. from Brandon, Mississippi.
Hey, Ron.
Calling in on the topic of Step 8.
Okay.
And one of the things we was asked to consider was our lack of willingness, on our overall journey towards spiritual growth. And I think one of the impacts is staying stuck. Once we've completed our 7-step prayer and asking God to remove all these things that stand in the way of our usefulness to Him and our fellows, what in order to move forward, we have to start making the list, and be willing to do the work required for that. And some of the greatest spiritual growth toward moving toward what we commonly call the promises, even though there's tons, I don't know, maybe toward 150 or so promises in the big book. In order to move toward those basic ones, we have to keep moving forward in the steps. And, it's just willingness to make the list. We haven't, started on step 9. It's just the list. And sometimes I think we let the fear of 9 impede, step 8. That's what I've noticed in my own program. But also considering, what specific fears or emotions require the most courage to confront. While identifying those, we have heard the things that come to my mind that, kind of stood out and stand out even today when looking at amends owed is the risk involved. There's that fear of rejection. There's that fear of being abandoned, fear of being exposed emotionally to someone that might have been very risky for a lot of us in the past or even through childhood, to risk such a thing. And so it pulls up old fears, old traumas, that sort of thing that could be relived and re-experienced. And, there's a lot that goes just under that fear of abandonment, that risk of once again feeling like we don't belong or being shut out or less than or not enough. That's a huge risk, emotionally. And so, I think the fear can be great, but for me, if I go back and use that 7th step prayer and the other prayers and, step out on that, tightrope, it also can have the greatest rewards in facing those. And that's the kind of things that come to mind. And I'm actually currently going back and doing some cleanup through another program on an amends list and looking at some abandonment of my own in the past and even in sobriety. And, it's so funny how it's the very couple that, relationships of having to look at the amends in that carries the greatest risk. And for me, what that looks like is it's the people that I love the most on the list, that there's the most to lose. So that's kind of getting a little current there, but I hope everybody's doing good and have a wonderful and blessed 2026, one day at a time. Thank you for all you do. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I very much relate to the idea of getting stuck on 8 because you don't want to do 9 and just looking ahead, and it's like so easy to just, maybe I need to work on my 4th step more before I share my 5th step, it's I don't know if it's natural because it's not good, but it happens. And I will say that there's kind of just a thing that keeps happening over and over again, which is just you have to just, sure, you're afraid and you're worried, but at the end of the day, if you want to stay sober, you got to do it. And that's it.
All right, awesome. All right, Michelle, Tasha's coming your way. Here we go.
Hi, Mark and everyone at the Recovered Cast. This is Tasha calling in from Brooklyn, New York.
Hey, Tasha. On
the topic of step 9 and amends. This was such an important step for me in ways that I didn't really expect. Obviously, I was quite nervous about approaching people in my life that I'd harmed to make amends to, and it was so helpful to me to have a sponsor involved in that process because I didn't really know how best to do it, how best to structure my amends. And what I did was created a script related to each individual, naming the harms that I had done and taking accountability for those. I never said I'm sorry in my amends, but I said it was wrong of me to do this. And then in each case, I asked what I could do to help make it right. And, it really was for me the turning point in terms of feeling some freedom I think it's easy, or it was easy for me to forget that the ninth step promises were the promises of the ninth step, and they weren't just things that would happen by osmosis by participating in recovery, but it was really about going through that very often awkward and painful process of meeting people individually. And I learned a lot about myself and my relationships by participating in the ninth step. There were a few cases which stand out for me in which I made amends for things that I had remembered from years ago. These were actually childhood things. When I went through the step, I was asked to look at everything I'd done, even before my active drinking. And I discovered that some things I'd been carrying around weren't even my responsibility. Like I'd misremembered certain things. And I don't say that to let myself off the hook, but I say that because it helped me realize how much that I tended to blame myself and take responsibility for things that were beyond my control as well. So overall, it was a really enlightening process. It made me feel a lot lighter. And I think that it also made me look at my behavior more closely on a day-to-day basis, because I wanted to avoid having to go through that process again. So it was a pivotal step for me in my recovery, and I look forward to hearing the show this week. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Tasha. Yeah, you unpacked a lot there, talking about some of the freedom that comes from those action steps and outcomes that you weren't really expecting through making these amends, and how it was an enlightening process. And I was hoping I would get a chance to tell this story today, because I've been talking about it for days. I had a very profound spiritual experience with one of my amends, and it came 3 years into sobriety. It was amends that I didn't know I had to make, and I was sitting at a meeting, as we all do, and someone had said something and shared something that kind of, it was like an epiphany in a way, and I was like, wow, I think they were talking about how difficult it was, an employer that they had to, like you, Mark, they had to make an amends to, and how they had realized that they were difficult to manage. They were not easy to deal with, and they had to make amends just for, being a difficult employee. And there was this resentment that I had carried with me. I carried that resentment. I did the fourth and fifth, but I had gotten fired in active addiction, and I was still carrying that resentment. I was wrongfully fired, even though I was under the influence every day. I was a director of a child care center. And gosh, the liability of that. But I carried that one. And in that moment when he had that share, I had realized, I'm like, you know what? I was a difficult employee. I was difficult to manage. She did what she had to do to take care of her center and like everybody else that I was responsible for. And I went to my sponsor and I told her about this epiphany that I had. This is an amends. This resentment is actually an amends. And I debated for a while to reach out to her, because it had been, gosh, I don't know, 5-6 years since that had happened. And I didn't think she'd want to talk to me. And I had to track her down on social media. I think I found her on LinkedIn, and I mulled over this. I reached out to her, and I did make a little bit of an amends in the message, just to kind of, let her know why I needed to meet with her, because she lived out of state. And she responded to me. She agreed to meet with me. She came up from Ohio, and she received me very well, and I explained what was going on and why I was behaving the way that I was, and I was like, I was really difficult to manage, and you had to let me go. I mean, she said that was one of the hardest terminations she's ever had to do. I did not make it easier for her. She didn't know what was going on with me, but she knew I was struggling, and she knew I was a risk. And yeah, we sat and we talked for hours, and we had a really good experience, and I felt so free after that. And I've been talking about this amends actually the past couple days. And I was with my sponsor last night, and I got a text from a friend, and it was her letting me know that this boss had passed away yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So I figured I'd honor that today. and talk about this amends and how profound it was, because my first thought was like, wow, I'm so glad that I pushed through like all of those complex emotions and was able to tell her, that she was very justified in letting me go, because that was hard for her too, and that I was able to have that experience. And like you were talking about, Mark, how what you were carrying by not, by keeping that person in that column, I was able to do that amends, and I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So remember, abandon yourself to God and admit your faults. Clear away the wreckage of the past and give freely. God bless, and see you next time.